Okay. In part one, we proved that these two triangles, the yellow and the blue triangles, were congruent by side, 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 but we used that to help us prove that angle B is congruent to angle D by CPCTC, or the corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. All right. Now, this next one's kind of a long one, but it actually shows you something completely different. We're trying to prove that we're given that AB is parallel to ED, but it's also congruent to ED. And we'll mark that right here, stating that these two are parallel and that these two are congruent. So we have those marked, and we have that C is the midpoint of AD. We'll come back to that in just a moment. But we're trying to prove that C is also the midpoint of BE. So now, you'll see this. You probably won't see anything like this on your homework quiz or even on a test because of timing. But I wanted to give you it might be a little bit more challenging, but I want you to see how it works. Okay, so the first statement, of course, is our given. And remember, we got to also prove that the two triangles, triangle ABC, is congruent to triangle DCE. We got to prove that those two triangles are congruent here. And I highlight them in yellow and blue. So triangle ACB is congruent to triangle DCE. So those two triangles are congruent. That's what we're trying to first prove. Then we can prove that C is the midpoint of BE. All right. Now, we know that C is the midpoint of AD. So that means it splits the segment in half. Well, since it splits the segment in half, then that means that both halves are congruent. So I'm marking them congruent, but I'm also stating that they're congruent by the definition of midpoint. Now, you could also use definition to bisect here because it's a segment. Now, with an angle, you couldn't even use midpoint, but it does, as long as it's a segment, it's good. All right. Now, it also states here that angle A is congruent to angle D. Well, why are they congruent? Well, if you look, these two lines are parallel, and these are alternate interior angles. Well, then next, we have AC, angle ACB, which is right here, and angle DCE, which is right there. And those are both vertical angles. All right, and honestly, I didn't even have to do that step. I could have just proven it right there, but I went to the extra step. So, and I just caught myself doing that. But anyway, I can either prove the triangles congruent by side angle side, SAS, or now that I have more information, by ASA. And technically, I could even use angle side if I wanted to, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. So the triangles are congruent. Now that I have proven that these triangles are congruent to each other, I can prove the remaining parts are congruent. And that would be BC. I can prove that BC is congruent to CE by CPCTC. And remember that I'm trying to prove that that C is the midpoint of BE. Well, if I've proven that these two parts are congruent, then that means that the C is the midpoint, and that is by definition of midpoint. All right. So to sum it all up, I didn't even need this step right here. I could have just done it with what I had, but I went ahead and went an extra step. And sometimes you can do that. You can go extra steps. You just have to make sure you have enough steps in there. So, all right. So that's that. But notice, I did not use CPCTC here. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent until after I prove that the triangles are congruent to one another, which is right here. I must emphasize that in order to complete the proof, use CPCTC, you must first prove the triangles are congruent. And CPC stands for the corresponding parts are congruent, triangles are congruent. And it says it again. Did I mention that in order to complete the proof and use CPCTC, you must first prove that the two triangles are congruent? Okay, so I emphasized it several times. So you get the idea of how it works? All right. So that is section 4.4. And your homework quiz on this is due on Friday. So go ahead and get to work on it.